Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. It seems that the so called allies in the Western Bloc or the NATO bloc are turning against each other. And I'm going to discuss this issue today because it's very important to see how these alliances are made between these NATO countries. Because according to the mainstream media and the politicians of the NATO countries, the alliances between these countries are based on rules, orders, international law, values, and mutual interests. And I think this is not completely accurate. Of course, there are so many interests that these countries share between each other, but democracy and values are not one of them. So, Zelensky was really unhappy before he was heading to the NATO summit, and he bashed NATO and the leaders of NATO on Twitter in English before he arrived in Vilnius. And it seems that the leaders of NATO, of course, in France, London, the United States, Germany, were not really happy with Zelensky, and they told him to cool off, bro. And I will come back to that later. But it seems that what really happened there, there are so many cracks among the politicians of NATO. War efforts in shambles as hawks turn on each other at NATO summit. This is actually an article from, I believe it's from Bloomberg, if I'm not mistaken. And Volodymyr Zelensky was running hot ahead of his sit down with NATO leaders on Tuesday evening. The Ukrainian president had been angered earlier in the day by what he said was an quote absurd reluctance to give his country a clear timeline on membership. That outburst, in turn, riled the partners who have funneled billions of dollars of weaponry and aid into Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion. The US had been given no warning before Zelensky unleashed his attack on social media. All day Wednesday, the above, this picture, which is very real, this above photo of an isolated and defeated looking Zelensky standing amid NATO heads of state with backs turned circulated widely on social media. And things were even more tense behind the scenes as Bloomberg writes, quote, over dinner in Vilnius with US President Joe Biden back at his hotel, the other leaders delivered a clear message to Zelensky, according to one person who was present. They told him, you have to cool down, bro, and look at the full package, Zelensky was told. While it's not quite clear yet, a full on hero to zero story, things are certainly sliding in that direction given its unprecedented that the Ukrainian president, who previously enjoyed rockstar status in Western capitals since the start of the invasion, could be told to basically cool it. So this is not from an alternative media. This is from the mainstream media. And now they're acknowledging that there are cracks between Zelensky and other NATO members. And the thing with the Ukrainian politicians, diplomats, leaders, I was pointing out to this since the beginning of the Russian invasion or the Russian offensive on Ukraine. And I was telling you all the time that these politicians are not grateful and they're not showing any gratitude for for their allies in the West. For example, the former ambassador of Ukraine in Germany, uh, Melnik, who is a big fan and he glorifies and all the time Bandera, who was Hitler's, of course, ally, and uh, he's a committer of a Holocaust during the World War II. Of course, his grave is here in Munich, and they go and pray for him all the time. Anyways, uh, he was bashing the German chancellor while he was here ambassador. Goes against all the diplomatic etiquette and the political etiquette that is known among politicians and among all diplomats, even if you are not in good terms with other politicians. See, for example, even the Russian side used to always use the term "our partners" in the West until this war erupted. But even Ukraine, whose entire existence is based on, relies on, or depends on the Western support, were it not for the Western support and NATO support, Ukraine will be wiped off the map, in my opinion. And this is not a personal opinion, this is a fact that you also have to believe in, because the entire Ukrainian army, ammunition, training, intelligence support, aerial support, everything, even the recovery or repairing of the equipment that Ukraine has is thanks to NATO and thanks to the West. But Zelensky is not grateful for it, and he is bashing his allies, East and West, because he wants to join NATO. And the West doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO, because if Ukraine joins NATO, then there is a responsibility for NATO to protect Ukraine directly, and they don't want to fight Russia. They want for the Ukrainians to die for NATO and not for NATO to die for Ukraine. I don't understand why is this so controversial. This is the truth of the matter, right? They want Ukrainians to die for NATO. They are using the Ukrainians as a cannon fodder. I told you this from day one, and I don't understand how some Ukrainians do not realize that this is the case in July 2023. But funny enough, the UK defense minister, when he couldn't hold his all this criticism, and he told Zelensky, "We are not Amazon, bro. The UK demands tanks from ingrate Zelensky." Ukraine's Western backers are showing increasing frustration with President Zelensky, with Britain's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace warning on Wednesday that people want to see a bit of gratitude, and pointing out that nations like the United Kingdom aren't a version of Amazon.com for Zelensky's weapons demands. Wallace made the comments in Vilnius, Lithuania, where the NATO alliance is holding its annual summit. Zelensky, though his country is not a member of NATO, was in attendance, with Wallace's comments coming right after Zelensky publicly blasted his benefactors for their quote absurd refusal to grant his country expedited NATO membership. Instead of saying thank you, Zelensky snapped back Wednesday, "I believe that we were always grateful to the United Kingdom." But he said thank you now. I will show you a video. He was like repeating thank you maybe 40 times. The Biden government has acknowledged that a recent controversial decision to supply Ukraine with child killing cluster bombs outlawed by most countries was driven in large part by the fact the West is running out of supplies. Guys, this is so important. Even Joe Biden acknowledged that the West is going out of ammunition, and they're no more able to supply Ukraine on the same with the same pace, weaponry, ammunition, and all these supply lines. And they were laughing at Russia at the beginning. They were saying that Russia is out of ammunition. Russia no more has missiles, rockets, etc. And now we can see in July 2023 that Russia is not out of ammunition. And I'm not trying to defend Russia here. I'm telling you that they were lying to you. And now, when it comes to the cluster bombs, this is Jen Psaki in 2022, before she left the White House as a spokesperson for the White House and she became an MSNBC journalist. She said that the cluster bombs are war crimes, and now the United States is supplying cluster bombs to Ukraine because they are out of ammunition. Let's check together.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration, and is there a red line for how much violence will be tolerated against civilians in this manner that's illegal and potentially a war crime?
It would be. I don't have any confirmation of that. We have seen the reports. If that were true, it would potentially be a war crime. Obviously, there are a range of international fora that would assess that. So certainly we would look to that.
So
to be a
this
part of
is
that
Jen Psaki was assuring, as she was the spokesperson of the White House, that it's potentially war crimes because the cluster bombs could, there's the possibility or a high probability that these bombs do not explode, and they're just like, they look like small gifts or small toys, and kids come and they collect them and they get blown up, and this is going to happen in Ukraine. But as long as they're blowing up Russian kids, I think they don't have any problem with that, because they consider the Russians less than humans, just like they considered Syrians who live up until this moment. Of course, Syrians who live in government held areas are subhumans for them. They could die, they could be slaughtered, they could slowly die by sanctions. If somebody is sick and ill and doesn't find medication, it's fine, because we have to sanction Syria, right? So this is the same case. But the issue of gratitude was also addressed by Rand Paul, his Republican senator, and it seems that he was angry again on Zelensky, not only Biden, on Fox News, and he said, quote, "We gave him $100 billion, and he has the audacity to be so brazen as to tell us we better speed up the process. That's not very grateful for the $100 billion we have already given him." Let's watch it together.
So you heard the President Zelensky say that he thought that the lack of a timeline for them for NATO entrance was absurd and unprecedented. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, there's an old English adage he might need to become aware of: never look a gift horse in the mouth. We've given them $100 billion, and he has the audacity to be so brazen as to tell us we better speed it up. I'd say that's audacious. I'd say that's brazen, and I'd say it's not very grateful for the $100 billion that we've given him so far. So, no, putting them in NATO right at this moment, I agree with President Biden. I don't agree with President Biden on a lot, but Biden is right. Were we to put him in NATO now, both Biden and many other foreign policy experts have said putting them in now would guarantee that we would now have an active role in the war in Ukraine, more than just supplying arms, but actually sending troops and an obligation to do so. So I think it'd be a huge mistake.
Yes, it will be a huge mistake if they accept Ukraine into NATO, because then the United States and the rest of the NATO countries will have the legal obligation to join the war directly and defend Ukraine, and not only supply them with weapons. And as I mentioned, they don't want to do that. They don't want to fight for Ukraine. They want the Ukrainians to fight for them. But I want to mention two things here. One, the issue that the United States has given Ukraine $100 billion aid is that we have given them $100 billion as aid. Do you really think that the $100 billion all went to or invested in security or medication or humanitarian affairs? No, of course not. There are billions of dollars of it were pocketed, billions of dollars of it were recycled, and this military-industrial complex has made lots of money from this war. And also they want more destruction in Ukraine for BlackRock and JP Morgan to come and reconstruct. They already agreeing with the Ukrainian government for reconstruction plans. Why do you think that is? And why do you think there are places that they want Ukraine to invade again or try to capture again or defend it very fiercely? Because they want the city to be destroyed, so that they come and reconstruct it. This is a business opportunity for them. Secondly, the difference, for example, Syria buys all its weapons from either Iran, China, or Russia, and Syria has paid, for example, money for certain types of weaponry they didn't receive. They didn't receive yet. Imagine Bashar al-Assad is going into a conference with Putin and he's bashing Russia, for example. Everybody has to know its size. Syria is not a superpower. Ukraine is not a superpower. And these countries rely on other countries to buy weapons. And you have to show some respect to the bigger players, because you are not, as I mentioned, a powerful country who can dictate on others what you want to do. And you are part of an alliance. So Syria knows its limits. And although Syria paid, for example, for these weapons, not just like Ukraine, Ukraine it doesn't even have money for that now. That's the difference between allies that they believe in certain outcomes, political outcomes, shared political outcomes of values, and they can be patient on their allies if they are not able to produce, or there are certain political obstacles for it, or even security obstacles for it, right? So you have to be understanding for your allies. But Ukrainians, it's crazy. Since the beginning of this war, they're just like talking with a high nose like this, very arrogant, and they're just bashing their allies and just like, you have to do this and you have to do. I mean, partly maybe they know because they are doing this for NATO, and partly they know that this is not only their war, and deep inside they know that the root of the causes for this war is NATO, and so they're doing the bidding and the fighting for NATO. So they're somehow probably also telling to NATO, look, buddy, we're fighting for you, not only for ourselves. So you have to hurry and you have to give us more weapons. I think that's the case mostly. But Zelensky, it seems that he left Vilnius, and I don't know where is he going with the train. And this is a fastened video, like it's been It's around 6-7 minutes, but they made it like 2 minutes. He says now after this Vilnius meeting or summit, he is thanking all the leaders of the West, and he repeated the term "thank you" in Ukrainian every 10 seconds, 47 times in 8 minutes.
Я вдячний усім. Дякую пану президенту Байдену. Дякую Литві. Дякую за кожен український прапор. І дякую, Вільнюсе, за емоції. Я дякую країнам та лідерам. Нідерланди, дякую. Дякую, Данія, дякую. Дякую, Сполучене Королівство, Ріші, пане прем'єр-міністре. Я дякую. Франція і пан президент Макрон. Я дякую. Дякую за підтримку.
I don't want to continue all this because it might be annoying for the noise for you, but this is already we're 13 times. He said thank you. There are 47 times, so there's still 34 times he will repeat thank you, thank you, thank you for all the leaders of NATO, because it seems that they told him that he can't be that brazen with his criticism, and yeah. He has to show some gratitude. So the good guy, the good boy, recorded himself in the train thanking his allies. The problem is that even if he's thanking his allies, even whatever he does, he's stuck. Zelensky is stuck, and believe me, you don't want to be in his shoes. Zelensky is in a very bad situation. All the options in front of him are bitter. He is stuck with his allies, and he is stuck with his enemy from both sides, because his allies are not really his friends, because they have expectations and they have limitations, and they expect from him to do certain things. And remember what Biden told him in Vilnius. In Vilnius, when they met, Biden told him, I quote, "Bad news for you, Mr. Zelensky. We are not going anywhere. You are stuck with us."
And bad news for you is we're not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yeah.
And I will start. You said about 500 days is really a difficult job for our people, soldiers and civilians, mothers, fathers, and children, really to fight for their life, for their life, for these values. And thank you very much that all these days you are with us.
Like, he's really, the guy is tired, really. I'm telling you, you don't want to be in his place. This guy is, he's of course, he's an actor. He doesn't know anything about politics. He doesn't know anything about geopolitics. He doesn't know anything about military affairs. There's so many advisors coming probably from the CIA, the Pentagon, and the MI6, and all these allied countries teaching him what he has to say, how he has to act. He's just an actor, but it's a very tiring job for him too. But we do remember that Zelensky, during his inauguration, when he came to power, he was promising peace with Russia, right? This is the Republican against Senator Ron Johnson. He posted this video, and apparently he says, I was at Zelensky's inauguration. I think he was very sincere in his desire to have peace with Russia. This was after Russia had already invaded Crimea, eastern Ukraine. He wanted to do a peace deal with Putin. I don't know what happened in the intervening time period. Aaron Mate says, what happened was that Ukrainian Nazis threatened Zelensky if he made peace. Meanwhile, Democrats promoted war by impeaching Trump for freezing weapons to Ukraine, which were sent, quote, so that we can fight Russia over there. Adam Schiff, the GOP, agreed because warmongering is bipartisan. Let's see what Ron Johnson has to say about this.
To your point, Senator, that's kind of what Griff sounded like at the end there, where he was talking about our president's going to sit down with Mr. Zelensky and they're going to have a straightforward conversation about the future. If you were the president at this point, given the fact that he revealed a couple of days ago, we've run out of bullets, the big bullets that we like to use, what would you say to Zelensky?
Well, I was at President Zelensky's inauguration. I think he was very sincere in his desire to have peace with Russia. This is after Russia had already invaded Crimea, eastern Ukraine. He wanted to do a peace deal with Putin. I don't know what happened in the intervening time period. Obviously Putin invaded, but we need to get President Zelensky. As difficult as this is going to be, let's face it, there have been war crimes and atrocities, people slaughtered. Yeah. But unless we end this thing, more people are going to get slaughtered. There will be more atrocities.
Give them the 20%
we've got to focus on ending the war.
Give them 20% of the country and just say, okay.
Pardon?
Give them 20% of Ukraine and say, okay, you can keep it.
I'm not going to lay out the conditions. We have the Minsk agreement. Somehow we need to bring this war to an end.
Yep.
I think when Aaron Mate was saying that the Nazis threatened him if he agrees on a peace deal with Russia, I think he means this video, which I have it in my archives. This is Zelensky on a front line with the Azov battalion, with the Nazis in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbas region. I think 2019 or 2020, I'm not sure, but I think it's in 2020. And he's talking to the Nazi battalion and the Nazi officers about his plan to make peace with Russia, to end the war, and see how they behave with Zelensky, how they look at him, they ridicule him. Like Zelensky even had to say, like, I'm the president of this country. I'm not we will watch it together, but he had to repeat that he's the president of the country or pretend that he is in charge while they were mocking him. You can see in the eyes of these neo-Nazi guys and know what do they think about him and on whose hands is the power. Check.
Что демилитаризация украинских кордонов, мы бы хотели это все обсудить и формализировать, чтобы потом не было как у Петра Алексеевича.
Если ты со мной хочешь формализировать отношения?
В меморандуме.
Я с тобой?
Не я с вами, а все люди, которые в этом процессе, те, которым болит за Украину.
Как капитуляция, прошу так.
Формализация.
Я пришел, тебе сказал, вы оружие вывезете, а ты меня переводишь стрелки.
Так я вам второй момент уже озвучил. Я вас услышал, вы сказали.
Ты мне вообще не можешь никакие ультиматумы озвучивать, Денис, ты не понял.
Так я вам ультиматум, я говорю, это были люди.
Нам за эти оружие забрать?
При чем здесь? Я
не понимаю, чем мы закончим сейчас разговор.
Так мы нормально общаемся.
Ну так и давай нормально общаться.
Ну никто же вас не пытается макнуть
никуда.
Вам передали то, что происходило в Украине, то, что люди
еще мне передал? Я же тебе говорю, ты мне скажи,
так я вам говорю, по Украине были акции.
Денис, по Украине вчера прошел дождь, вот что я слышу.
Ну, я вам рассказываю о том, что происходило.
Акции? Кто мне что передал? Говорю, давай. Что ты?
Вот я вам и говорю, что люди хотят встречи с вами.
Какие люди? Нет,
которые вышли на мероприятие под...
Фамилию ты можешь мне сказать или нет? Ты что ты все время...
Ну, хотите, Плеханов, Кухарчук, это по разным областям.
Денис, это же так не делается.
Так спросили, я
подожди, вышел Стадник вам, Николай Викторович.
Наш губернатор.
Передал письмо. Да, или что вы ему там... Вернее, вы ему передали.
Конечно, для президента.
Он мне передаст, я прочитаю.
Вы же спросили, что там было. Я вам и рассказываю, что, собственно, в этом письме. Вы же сами спросили
Денис,
только что.
Послушай, я президент этой страны.
Конечно.
Мне 42 года. Я ж не лох. Я тебе пришел и сказал, оружие уберите. А ты меня не переводи на акции.
Причем мы с вами уже поговорили, вы потом спросили.
Я не поговорил с тобой, я хотел увидеть в глазах понимание. А увидел парня, который решил, что перед ним какой-то лопух стоит, и переводишь меня на другую тему.
Так какая другая тема? Мы уже этот момент обсудили, я вам следующим сказал еще один момент.
Я услышал, что окей, ты мне скажи ок, все.
Так у нас нет оружия в руках.
Это значит, ты меня не услышишь.
Слушайте.
Парни, это я...
Imagine the president of a country who is the head of the armed forces, commander of the armed forces. He has to go to the front line and talk with the neo-Nazi battalions and tell him, look, I'm the president of this country. I'm not a sucker. You have to pull back. Imagine a president or a commander or a chief of staff or any military commander has to go to a lower ranking officer or any battalion and has to force him to withdraw from some place. Imagine if a junior commander or a junior officer is not listening to his superior. In the military, this doesn't happen. But these neo-Nazi battalions, first, they're very strong in Ukraine, and secondly, they don't respect Zelensky. Who the fuck is Zelensky? First of all, Zelensky for them is Jewish, and they are very, very anti-Semite. Secondly, they know that he's a comedian. He doesn't know anything about the battlefield. And thirdly, they know he's incompetent about these cases, right? So how can they respect Zelensky? It's difficult. You put yourself in their shoes, like for these neo-Nazis, right? You cannot respect Zelensky. These neo-Nazis, they have more experience in the hostilities, in fighting, in the strategies, everything. So imagine if President Bashar goes to now in Hama or Homs or in Aleppo and tells the army, you have to withdraw or you have to attack. I'm telling you, I'm not a sucker. The entire world would laugh. Entire world would mock him. Entire world would report about this. But have you seen this video at any mainstream media outlet? No. So the media is very, very, very dishonest in this case. That's why we are here, guys, on YouTube trying to deliver to you such content. I'm also, guys, posting the videos on Twitter. Hopefully, very soon, Twitter would become more content creator friendly for content creators. On YouTube, it's very crazy. Like I'm posting videos like this, I'm getting 2, 3, 4,000 views. On Twitter, I'm getting sometimes 100,000 views, sometimes 200,000 views, depending on the video. So it's very huge difference here and there. But for Zelensky, I would like to say, what did you expect from NATO? It was already you were warned from the beginning that being America's enemies could be dangerous, but being a friend is fatal. And America, the United States, do not have friends. They might have temporary allies for a certain purpose, for a certain objective, but they don't have allies. They don't have friendships. It's not like Syria and Iran. It's not like Syria and Russia, or even Iran and other non-state actors in the region. There is friendship between these countries or between these state and non-state actors, regardless of, even if they disagree on so many things, but the friendship stays. But when you turn yourself into a pawn, unfortunately, I'm saying, for the United States and for the UK, you have to pay the price now. You have to follow what they tell you. You're not in charge. You cannot tell them you have to do this, you have to give me that, you got to do. No. You are the weak side in this equation, unfortunately. And remember what happened to Saddam Hussein. He was supported by the United States, then they killed him. Al-Qaeda and all these jihadists were supported by the United States, and still, of course, but they killed Osama bin Laden, supposedly. Gaddafi, in his last few years, he had a very good relationship with the United States and the West in general. They killed him. And now compare him with somebody like Assad, who was also, they tried to kill him, they tried to do everything against him, but he had allies, he had friends. They fought for him and for Syria in general. So, guys, I wanted to make a summary for the NATO summit and the frustration of Zelensky against his alleged or so-called allies. What do you think about it? Do you think Zelensky has the right to be frustrated, or do you think he has willingly turned himself and his country into pawn for NATO? What is your opinion? Please let me know in the comments below. I've been your host, Almassian of Syriana Analysis. If you're new, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. And also, I would be very grateful if you can become a patron. Buy me 1 coffee per month. It costs you only $2. It helps me a lot, guys, to continue and bring contents like this for you and to stay independent, because independent journalism can be fearless and we can present to you everything, the facts from both sides, and comprehensive understanding without fear, censorship, or being kicked out from jobs, and having somebody knocking on our door and telling us that you cannot post this and you cannot post that. And if you work for the mainstream media, you know that you could be kicked out of your job even if you are big, like Tucker Carlson, and it happened with him. So it happens with everyone. So we have to empower each other. I bring you information, knowledge, education, and hopefully I'm successful in doing so. And so if you appreciate it, please become a patron, and see you next time.